So after this group got together and they created the Agile Manifesto, the other part of the team came back from skiing on the slopes and they looked at what was on the whiteboard. They're like, yes, that's amazing. And they all kind of coalesced around it. They all thought that this was a good description of what they shared in common, all these lightweight methodologies and what their sort of common umbrella of what they were trying to do was. And so, they hung out for another day or so at this Utah resort, and then they all kind of went to their respective homes. And then afterwards, they created the Agile Manifesto principles. And so this was sort of a collection of different principles that they were kind of emailing back and forth to each other to add to the manifesto. And where the manifesto is sort of this large statement of value, the principles are really a little bit more pragmatic. They're sort of little kind of ideas, principles that you should sort of consider when you're trying to embrace a more agile mindset. And the first principle was our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And you see this a lot in Scrum, but you also see this in some of the other Agile frameworks, some extreme programming, delivering in iterations, sort of small iterations over time. And the idea behind it is that this is coming from kind of the old way that software was developed before the Agile Manifesto, and still is in some organizations. But this idea that you create a massive amount of requirements, and then after you've spent a huge amount of time creating these requirements, then you start to work on the software. So this is kind of the first phase where you create the requirements and then you start to deliver the software. So what they're saying here is that the software is actually the most valuable thing. And so the reason that the organization is hiring software developers is to create software. And so no customer wants to spend a huge amount of time creating these software requirements only to run out of money and then never have any software. So you're just like, well, here's a 500-page requirement document for a software application that'll never exist because we ran out of money. And so instead, what Agile encourages you to do is deliver software continuously. And so you're always delivering small little iterations of software over time, so the customer is getting a continuous stream of value. And some of this, as you'll see later, is a little bit based on kind of these lean manufacturing ideas, lean software development ideas, is that you kind of want to have a value stream of continuous delivery of software. You want the customer to always be receiving software because that's what they're paying you for. Another thing that this continuous delivery of software does, which you'll see at sort of sprint review meetings and other things like that, is they show the customer progress. So instead of sending a memo out that says, here's where we're at as a team, you're sort of getting to see the software being developed in real time. And so sometimes, and this is why a lot of Agile teams discourage things like wireframing or giving PowerPoint presentations about what the software product will do, is that the idea behind it is that it's better to show a working software product, no matter how rudimentary it is, than it is to kind of spoof the customer into thinking that this is what the software product will do when we finally develop it, and have that sort of in place of working software. So it's better to have a simple product that works than it is to have a wireframe or a complex presentation of a software product that will exist in the future. And so you kind of see this early and continuous delivery of valuable software, and you see that throughout Scrum and a lot of the other Agile frameworks. Another thing that you see often is this welcoming changing requirements even late into software development. And Agile processes harness change for this customer's competitive advantage. And again, this is another thing, even in 2001, and it's become even more so, it's accelerated now, is that there's a huge competitive advantage in embracing change. If you come from sort of a project management background, then a lot of the project management frameworks kind of discourage change, is that change is the thing that causes problems. It's that you come up with this perfect plan and you spend a lot of money developing this plan, and then there's this change that disrupts everything, and then you have to sort of go back and make changes to the plan, or if you go back and add more money to the project or something like that. And Agile kind of flips this around and says, hey, there's a lot of benefit to change. Is that sometimes the customer will come up with new ideas even after you started developing the product, or sometimes your competitors, your competitors aren't sitting still, and they might come up with an interesting idea that you can incorporate into your product, which you wouldn't have been able to predict 6 months ago. So, this was a big part of extreme programming, was kind of the first to talk about this, embracing change and not just thinking of change as something that is a problem, but actually thinking of change as something that's an opportunity. And so there should be a way in in Scrum or whatever Agile framework you're doing you're using it to embrace these new changes that come up. You don't want to develop software with a framework that makes it difficult to incorporate interesting new ideas and changes you might get from the customer. Another one of the principles is working software is the primary measure of the team's progress. And so this is a key, if you come from a project management background, this is a big difference from how you might view projects, where a project manager would give progress reports, either with Gantt charts or something like that, or sometimes you'll have the stoplight diagrams, which shows when the team is on time or within their budget, and then a sort of a red flag goes up or a red light goes up that shows when they're running into trouble. But with Agile teams, you're focusing more on delivering high-value working software. And that if the team is delivering this working software, that's the best measure of progress. That you don't want your Agile team to say, well, we're not delivering that much software, but, we're really going through a lot of great training and we're really learning a lot of new things about what we'll need when we start delivering software. Is that it's better for the team to start delivering software immediately and then improve it over time than it is for them to prepare endlessly only to start delivering software later on. And so Agile teams get right into software development. If you're using Scrum, from the very first sprint, you should be delivering software. And sometimes you'll see teams that will do a sprint 0 or something like that, where they're doing a little bit of planning. And that can be good or bad, but it's not necessarily in line with the Agile Manifesto. This idea is that you should be able to deliver some valuable software even within 2 weeks, even in the very first sprint. The fourth principle is delivering working software frequently. And this might be a couple of weeks or a couple of months with a preference to deliver it in a shorter time scale. And you'll see this a lot with Scrum. That's what sprints are, is you're delivering software frequently or iteratively. And the idea behind this is it ties into the other principles, is that if you're delivering software frequently, it'll make it much easier for your customer to come up with interesting changes. And so imagine that you're developing a new app that you want to put in an app store. And so you're developing it, and then after 2 weeks, you come up with this interesting new functionality. And then one of your competitors comes up with a very similar functionality, but they do it slightly better. So then you might want to tweak your software in the next sprint or the next iteration so that it does it a little bit closer to the way your competitor does it. Now, you wouldn't be able to do this if you were delivering software every 6 months or every quarter or something like that. And so again, this idea behind Agile is that you're moving quickly, you're pivoting quickly when you see changes, and you're embracing new information as you get it. And the best way to do that is to deliver frequently. Now, when this was written in 2001, they talked about a couple weeks to a couple of months, but now really sprints or iterations, one of the standard ways to do it is 2 weeks. Anytime you go more than 2 weeks, then you're in danger of delivering your software too infrequently. And the fifth principle ties into these other four, where you have business and developers must work together daily throughout the project. And you see this a lot with Scrum. That's the role of the product owner, is that you have someone who owns the product, typically comes from the business side. And again, this ties in very closely to this customer collaboration value in the Agile Manifesto that you saw with the 4 values. And so if you're working closely with the customer, then you're much more likely to deliver valuable software. And this kind of makes sense that if the developers aren't the best people to sort of recognize what's going to be the most valuable for the customer. So it's best to have a customer representative, that's what it was called in extreme programming, in with the team, working on a daily basis, always helping them figure out what's the most valuable functions and features for them. And so you'll see that a lot with kind of these, with Scrum and with other Agile frameworks, is that there'll be a role on the team that helps them sort of figure out what the highest value is, and then you work in small iterations or sprints to deliver this high value thing. Again, this is a key part of the Agile Manifesto. This is the principles to help your organization embrace a more agile mindset. Now, the sixth principle was build projects around motivated individuals, and then give them the environment and support they need and the trust to get the job done. And this, again, this is a key part of embracing a more agile mindset. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about my grandfather or my uncle or my father even, who may have been able to walk down to a factory in Detroit and get a job as working on the auto line, and they wouldn't need to know anything, and then they would be trained on the job. And that's much different from how a lot of people work today, is you show up at the organization knowing way more a lot of times than the other people who are there, and even the other people who are managing you. I mean, that's the reason they hired you, is because you know stuff. You're a knowledge worker. And so it doesn't make sense to hire a knowledge worker, but then use this old management style to sort of look over their work. And so with a lot of agile teams, they'll work as cross-functional teams, which are sort of teams that are not in any one functional area. They won't be like a developer, database, quality assurance. You'll have teams which sort of generalize in many different areas. And you sort of give these individuals and teams the opportunity to deliver the product in the best way they see fit. And as you'll see later on, this is what Scrum typically calls the divide between the what and the how. Is the customer comes up with what they want delivered, and then the team focuses on how they're going to deliver it. And so that's their specialty, and so that's what they are, that's what they're good at. And so you should give them the responsibility and the support they need and the trust for them to get the job done.